Psalm 105. Let's just start with verse 12, where we left off last time in verse 11. Okay. When they were but few in number, and this is when Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's progeny were but few in number, few indeed, and strangers in it. They wandered from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another. He, God, allowed no one to oppress them. For their sake he rebuked kings. Do not touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. Basically, what we're getting here is a very concise history of the development of Israel. They were few in number. Well, Jacob's children, he had eventually his sons, of whom one was Joseph, sold by his brothers into slavery as a less horrible option. I think some of the brothers, really, they just wanted to kill him and leave him, out in there's no prairie in Israel, but to leave him out there and just be done with him. But there was a better option, and that was to sell him. So they did. You probably know the whole story. Joseph, through a series of miscarriages of justice, wrong accusations, he is imprisoned, and it takes years, almost a decade, a little more than a decade and a half, before something really good begins to happen for Joseph. He's lifted up into a place of supreme authority, second only to Pharaoh. And I can't do anything concisely, so I'm going to have to just cut right to the chase. While Joseph was in Egypt, he brings his entire family, all of his brothers, all of their families, and basically all of their goods to Egypt, where they settle, and they settle in a good part of Egypt. The Pharaoh gives them incredible preference and favor. But when he died, that Pharaoh, there arose other pharaohs who didn't have any regard for Joseph or Jacob. And there were 300 years of slavery and bondage in Egypt. They were few in number, few indeed, and strangers in it. They wandered from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another. This part in 14, he allowed no one to oppress them. I don't know exactly what he's talking about there. Now, maybe the psalmist is talking about as Abraham and after him Isaac began to wander from place to place, but even then, from country to country, king to king, it wasn't all roses. You remember Abraham, he took the lesser, having some brain belches here, the less desirable territory, and his nephew Lot takes the much more desirable but it is down in the plains where two kind of twin cities were, probably economically and metropolitanly, if there is such a word, very desirable places to live. Sodom and Gomorrah. They weren't oppressed, neither Abraham nor Lot, but for Abraham, he pretty much stayed out of harm's way. Lot plunked himself down right in the middle of it. But anyway, God allowed no one to oppress them. For their sakes, he rebuked kings. You go back to Abraham, Sarah, even as frankly, an old woman, was quite beautiful, and so beautiful that Abraham feared that when they were in this season of wandering, that the kings of these nations would kill him and take her into their harem. There's a lot of I call it intrigue, but really Abraham lied. She's my sister. Okay. Well, God really did rebuke kings. Abimelech closed all the wombs in the nation. And when Abimelech realized what he had done, he didn't punish Abraham. He gave him a fortune and asked him to please leave them alone. Here, I don't know where these words of God are recorded other than in this psalm, but in verse 11, the psalmist writes, he allowed no one to oppress them. For their sakes he rebuked the kings. Do not touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. Maybe, I don't know where he got that phrasing, but it encapsulates the essence of what God would have communicated to the kings of the kingdoms that Abraham especially, and then Isaac after him, wandered into. Do not touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. Now, I was a young guy in ministry. I don't know if it was just in the churches I was in and around, or if it was a kind of a more general sort of deal, but there were senior ministers and senior pastors who felt like they were constantly under attack from somehow from their own congregation, from other power players within the congregation. And they would quote this: do not touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. In other words, leave me alone, because I've got a Bible verse for it. Well, okay. I'll admit to you, this is kind of a hobby horse of mine. There's at least a peeve. That doesn't wash, okay? I was only in a church setting in ministry for 45 years, but I don't think I was this anointed one. I don't think I was one of his prophets. Not in the sense in which this phrase placed here was understood in the day in which it was written. The anointed ones that this is talking about, they were the guys. This was, I believe, Abraham and Isaac, later on Jacob and Joseph and his brothers, but they were designated in a peculiar and particular way as God's anointed ones. This is not like a promise. If you're a pastor, then you are God's anointed one and you are his prophet. For me, no. I mean, that doesn't work. But for the beginnings of the Israelite nation, they were his anointed ones. He, for reasons I don't understand, I can't fully explain, but he chose Abraham. And he spoke to and through Abraham. And that was the beginning of the whole nation of Israel. And then Isaac. And then it cascades through the genealogies. Well, okay. Verse 16. Again, in its context, we're talking about Hebrew history. He called down famines on the land and destroyed all their supplies of food. And he sent a man before them, Joseph, sold as a slave. Remember, I kind of did a spoiler there that Abraham and Isaac and then Jacob, and now there's what got Jacob and the rest of his family into Egypt was a famine, a severe famine. And don't forget that in that day, the whole world was agra. It was about crops and survival, crops and livestock and survival. And Joseph had been sold into slavery ahead of time. God sent a man before them, Joseph. He'd been sold into slavery. They bruised his feet with shackles. His neck was put in irons till what he foretold came to pass. Not what Joseph foretold, but what God foretold. Till the word of the Lord proved him true. The king sent and released him. The ruler of people set him free. This was more than just a pardon from the president. And then in verse 21, he made him master of his household, ruler over all he possessed, to instruct his princes as he pleased and teach his elders wisdom. This is a position of power, but it's also a position of authority and influence. And Joseph was raised to this position because God had in mind to execute his plan. And Joseph had no idea what God's big plan was, but he knew enough to trust God's plan. That's where I want to kind of land the plane today. I don't understand why God has taken me through some of the things that he's taken me through. I do not know what his plan is, honestly. I mean, I know little pieces of it, and in hindsight, I can see that he has been at work in his plan. But for today and tomorrow and the days after, I don't know. But I want to submit to his plan because it is best for me. Don't you think that Joseph must have had times where he was kind of rotting in prison, where he wondered, what's going on, God? Why is this happening? And more. And then another question, why is deliverance not happening? It's okay to have questions. It's okay to even be dissatisfied and frustrated. But it is for our best when we choose to release the control and let God do what God is going to do. Well, I'll try to do better next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.